Last lesson, we talked about the religious beliefs in ancient Greece. Today, we'll continue with the ancient Greek civilization on the topic of sports culture. Let's look at the first page of your notes. The ancient Greeks, they liked sports. As we mentioned, many of them were farmers. However, during the wartime, they have to become the soldiers of the countries. They were actually the part-time army because many of them, they were actually the farmers. However, when the countries were asking the citizens to help the country's armies in the wars, many of them will actually have to give up their original job and join the army. So that they are actually training themselves to be strong and muscular all the time. Therefore, they are organizing some of the sports competitions in different cities, and they're emphasizing always asking people to do more sports. And another reason is that they're actually using these kind of sports competition as a way to worship their gods. As we mentioned, there were many gods and goddesses in the ancient Greek cultures. The people, the citizens in these city-states, they were always finding the ways to worship the gods, for example, building temples, and they also thought that the god would be actually pleased to see that they're having some competitions. So they think that having these kind of competition is actually a way of entertaining the gods. Okay, so you can write down. They will help to worship and to entertain gods. So there are some examples. You can see here. For example, the Olympic Games, it was held in Olympia, and it was to worship the god of all gods, Zeus. The Heranian Games, also held in Olympia, was held to worship Hera, the queen of all gods. And also in another city-state that we mentioned in the last two lessons, Corinth, which was a city-state running the monarchy system. There was a game called the Pythian Games. It was to worship the god of sun, Apollo. Okay, so you can write down on your notes. Here, the Olympic Games were held in Olympia to worship Zeus. Heranian were to worship Hera. In fact, we can regard these competitions as a way of a religious ceremony, not just simple competition. It's a way to show that we are respecting the gods and we are serving the gods by providing them some entertainment. And this kind of entertainment is that will be competing with one another. So these kind of games, they will invite the athletes from different city-states, which means that a Olympic Games held in Olympia doesn't mean that only the citizens in Olympia have the rights to join these games, but actually different citizens from different city-states can also go to Olympia to join these games. Let's continue to look with this. However, looking at these pictures, and you will discover there's one very important criteria for all these athletes. That is, it seems that they're not wearing anything. You can also look at some pictures here. You see some sculptures nowadays also showing an athlete. The pottery, there were some figures on top of it, also the athletes. However, many of them were basically for the people that are wrestling and running, they're wearing nothing. So in fact, you can see this special feature is that the athletes, they were naked, 裸體. This is because that in general, they believe that behavior of getting naked is that they think that the physical fitness is actually symbolizing strength and beauty. They thought that by showing the body lines and the muscles were actually showing the kind of beauty. And to the gods, they want to show the best part of their bodies to the gods, so they will always train their bodies to perfection to show their respect to gods. And they also wanted to show that they know how to appreciate these kind of beautiful things. So it is a kind of practice, a kind of habit that they consider this kind of thing as a tribute to gods， 即係一種好似係一種 paying respect 對眾神 pay 一個 respect 咁樣嘅感覺啊。By showing appreciation of human body, that the gods would know how to appreciate these kind of beautiful things, and we the human who own these body parts were actually showing our biggest respect to the gods by showing the most perfect part, that is the muscular bodies, the most beautiful bodies with very smooth body lines. And sometimes they'll actually put on some olive oils on their bodies to show that, and it's like sparkling, okay. And also one more important thing is that, we learned that Athens and Sparta, these two big city-states in the ancient Greek civilization, they actually had a battle. Okay, that is very common in the ancient Greek civilization, that the city-states often have battles with one another, such as Athens and Sparta, which eventually the battle was won by Sparta. However, during these Olympic Games or other sports competition, there were actually a rule that all city-states had to follow. That is, no fightings were allowed at this period of time. Even when they were having war, having battles, they have to stop for a while for all the competitions, for all the athletes to join this competition. We call that the sacred truce. 係一個停戰啊，停火嘅協議 ，OK? Stopping all the military actions between different city-states. It is very important at that period of time, as we know that these kind of competitions were actually showing respect to the gods, so they cannot do anything that is maybe upsetting the gods. And one thing that would actually create some sad, unhappy things, such as the deaths of people, would be wars, battles. So they are making sure that no battles would be fighting during this period of time. Okay. So here, let's have a look at one video that is introducing you the Olympic Games.
Ah, the Olympic Games. Great, aren't they? But do you know where the story begins? Well, once upon a time, a long, long time ago. That's right, come on, yes, hurry up, over here in Greece. Well, ancient Greece to be exact. But do you know exactly where they began? Right here, at the foot of the highest mountain in Greece, Mount Olympus. This is where the very first Olympic Games were held in the ancient world. Now, what are your maths like? Can you work out how long ago the first Games took place? 776 years before the Common Era, Greece was one of the most advanced countries in the world. Okay, so the men did wear dresses. They called them togas. And they stood around talking about politics and philosophy and really brainy stuff like that. While the women had to run the household and look after the children and be bossed around by the men. But the ancient Greeks were very clever and hard-working. and they invented some fantastically useful and brilliant things. Like central heating. Yes, central heating. Toasty warm in winter. And showers. Very useful in that hot, sticky summer weather. Now, the Chinese say that they invented the wheelbarrow, but the Greeks used them too, and they invented a weapon called the crossbow, made of wood, which they used in battle. And they worked out how to make a crane. Very good for lifting heavy things. But let's get back to the Olympic Games. And you know where the word Olympic comes from, don't you? From Mount Olympus. The ancient Greeks believed that the 12 Olympic gods lived on top of the mountain. So every year they would gather at the foot of Mount Olympus to ask for special favours and to say thank you very much and give presents to the gods. Well, make that sacrifices, that's a better way of saying it. I don't think anyone would call a dead cow a nice present. To lighten the mood a bit after all that bloody sacrificing, they put on contests and competitions which came to be known as the Olympic Games. Now, it's not like today. You couldn't watch the games on TV eating Pringles on the couch. You had to be there. So what games did they play? This is a statue of a Greek sportsman called Discobolus by the ancient Greek sculptor Myros. You might have tried throwing discus yourself, and if you have, you'd be doing exactly what the Greeks did all those years ago at Mount Olympus. Except they weren't wearing Nike or Puma gear. The ancient Greeks competed in the nude. Oh, yes, they did. But why? Well, the weather is pretty hot in Greece, and also because the Olympic Games celebrated the achievements of the human body, and the athletes used olive oil to keep the skin smooth and make their bodies look sleek and muscly. And who could compete in these games? No women, I'm afraid. They were busy looking after the children, of course. You had to be a free man, and not a slave, and you had to be able to speak Greek. What sports did they play? Well, you know about the discus, but things like tennis, hockey, and synchronized swimming hadn't been invented back then. They had chariot racing competitions. They threw the javelin. There was boxing, and there was wrestling, and, of course, there were running races. A bit uncomfortable in the nude, I think. Talking about running, have you heard of the marathon? The very toughest of all running races. Marathon is a town in Greece about 26 miles from Athens. 490 years before the Common Era, there was a huge and fierce battle at Marathon. And the messenger boy, called Pheidippides, was given the horrible job of running all the way back to Athens to tell everyone the Greeks had won the battle. He made it all the way to Athens and managed to gasp, "The Greeks have won!" before he dropped dead on the ground. That's why the race of 26 miles is still called the Marathon today. It must have been a dramatic moment because it's caught the imagination of painters throughout history. Look at this picture. Pheidippides is exhausted. Here's an ancient Greek sportsman looking at his calendar and wondering when the next Olympics will be. Back then, they decided to hold these games once every 4 years. This 4-year period was known by Greeks as an Olympiad. They used it in their diaries and calendars to measure time. So the Olympic Games were held for over 1,000 years in ancient Greece until Emperor Theodosius put a stop to them. Why? Because they weren't Christian, and he wanted to make Christianity the big thing. So in 393 AD, they stopped. Now, let's spin forward more than 1,500 years and take you from Greece all the way to Paris in France. Let's meet the hero of our story, Baron Pierre de Coubertin. He was a rich French nobleman who was very interested in education. When he was a young man, he went to England to visit a boys' school called Rugby. "It's fantastic! The sport makes the boys strong, it gives them the discipline, and it makes them healthy and happy. It's wonderful!" He wanted to go back to the sporty days of the ancient Olympic contests and put on a competition between different countries. But first he had to persuade everyone to agree to his idea. Have you ever tried to persuade people to sell an idea you've got? It's hard. When he told people about his plan, they said, "It's crazy! It's ridiculous! It will never work! But he didn't give up, and in 1896, more than 1500 years after the last ancient Greek games, the first modern Olympic Games was held back in Greece, the country that invented the whole idea. Have you got any idea why the Olympic symbol looks like this? The 5 rings represent the 5 continents, and the colours are in all the national flags that compete. The Olympic motto is Citius, Fortius, Altius, which is Latin for faster, higher, stronger.
Okay, so let's go back to your notes. The second page. You can see we actually, nowadays we have the modern Olympic Games. So what are some of the differences and the similarities between these two kinds of Olympic Games, the ancient Olympic game that we're learning today and the modern Olympic Games that we are having today? So by looking at the videos just then, you should have some ideas on these blanks. So let's try to fill this in together. Firstly, the aim, so that we learned that the ancient Olympic game was to worship and to entertain gods. So write it down. And for the Olympic Games, it is to worship Zeus in particular. Well, for nowadays modern Olympic Games, it is a bit different. We no longer use this to worship the Greek gods and goddesses, but we are now using this actually as a way to promote the peace and cultural exchange from different countries through the kinds of different sports competitions and activities. Okay, so write down. To promote international peace and cultural exchange through sports activities. Yes, there were more than 100 countries participating in modern Olympic Games nowadays. We don't have these kind of battles, wars when we're having Olympic Games. People are hugging one another, congratulating the winners of the games, and they're exchanging their cultures. So it's a very, very interesting and a very, very warm event nowadays. Secondly, let's talk about the period of time. The ancient Olympic Games started in 776 BC, the ancient Greek period of time, until 394 AD. It was under the rule of the Roman Empire. It was believed that there was 293 Olympic Games held in this period of time. Well, for the modern Olympic Games, it began in 1896. The first modern Olympic Games was held in Athens, Greece. And then it was selected in different places. Okay. For the frequency, it has been remaining unchanged, that it happened every 4 years. And we call this kind of thing the Olympiad. Oh. What does that mean? That means every single Olympic game is actually a way to count the time. Olympiad 1 means the first 4 years, and Olympiad 2 second 4 years. So nowadays, in 2020, we'll have the Tokyo Olympic Games. It will be Olympiad 999, no, 699. Olympia 699. So in 2020, then it will be the 4th year of this Olympiad 699. It's a way to calculate the time in ancient Greece. And in the video there was a mistake. The first Olympic game, it was not held under the Mount Olympus, it was in Olympia. If you still remember from the map last lesson, we have seen that actually Mount Olympus and Olympia was quite a huge distance, okay, quite far away. For the Olympic Games, the modern Olympic Games, it was held in Olympia every time, and different participants from different places will go to Olympia. And for modern Olympic Games, it will be held in different cities in 5 continents. So they will select a city every 4 years. The last Olympic game was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in America, and then this year it will be in Tokyo. Japan it is in Asia, and then the previous one in 2012 it was in London, Britain, so it was in Europe, and then 2008 it was in Beijing, in Asia also. So they are selecting different cities from different continents every single time. And for the participants, in ancient Olympic Games, there are generally the Greek freemen. Okay, freemen, only freemen, slaves, no women. For nowadays, we can have both men and women athletes. And for the attire, that means the dressing code. In the past, they're not dressing, so they're naked. Modern Olympic Games, they wear sportswear. We can see one very special change in especially this one, swimming. So in the past, people only wear maybe a swimming suit, and nowadays they're actually developing some very more technological advanced swimming suit, so that you would be actually having a more easier, you're having a body that would be having a similar structure just like the fish swimming in the sea, so that it can make you swim faster. Modern technology, with the modern technological advancement, they're making the swimsuit nowadays were actually more and more high tech to improve the result and to improve the performance of every athlete. And for sports event, in the past, the running, well, for sure, there were also these kind of things like the chariot racing, wrestling, okay. So they tend to be more like track and field events with something, track and field events and some other events with physical contact. But for nowadays, we are having a lot more team sports, okay, such as football, basketball, and we also have not just on the land but also swimming in the water. And there are also some other things that require not just by competing who is stronger or who is faster, but also maybe who is more skillful and who is more, let's say, more beautiful. It is something like gymnastics, okay? 体操啦. So they're actually consisting of different categories of sports. Finally, is about the prize. We learned that the prize in the ancient Greek would be a crown made of the olive leaves, just like this, and is also being commonly seen in modern cultures, saying it's representing actually champions, a crown made of olive leaves. Well, nowadays Olympic Games are mainly giving you the medals. Okay, so let's write it down. The prize. In the past, it would be a crown made from leaves. And now we will have the bronze, silver, and gold medals. Some countries would then give the athletes some cash rewards. And you've heard that actually some more wealthy countries do. Maybe, for example, let's say if your football team is winning the Olympic Games, they're actually sending you like one each a prize of like car or so on. Just depends on how your government put how much money on the developing the sports or the helping the athletes, and the rewards would be different. But for the Olympic, the committees of the Olympic Games will give you the medals, which represents quite a lot for the sportsman. We're going to go back to the research exercise. So list one similarity between ancient Olympic Games and modern Olympic Games. So you can write anything from the table of comparison between the two types of Olympic Games. I can give you an example. For example, in the aspect of events. What type of events? Okay, both games included track and field events. Okay, nowadays we still have running. We still have discus, all these kind of things. We don't have chariot racing nowadays. We have some other forms of racing. Okay, such as these types of track and field events, Tian Hong. So you can also write one more similarity, that is about the frequency. Both of them were held every 4 years. Okay, so this is the part of the Olympic Games and the sports events, sports culture in ancient Greece.